To my beloved granddaughter Catherine, I leave behind our lakeside house and $150,000. The gift left behind by my grandparents opened a new door to my life, while also severing the final thread of the illusion of a family. My name is Catherine Harper. Since I was little, I grew up constantly being compared to my older sister. She excelled in school, is good at sports, and is the pride of our parents. I, on the other hand, was clumsy and always seemed to be hidden in her shadow. At home, whatever my sister chose was always prioritized, and my opinions were often brushed aside. Whether it was about what we ate, where we went, or even the topics of conversation, everything revolved around her. Over time, I began to believe it doesn't matter whether I'm here or not. In such a daily life, my only solace was my grandparents' house. No matter what I talked about, they always listened intently. Whether it was a small event at school or a story about how I had struggled in gym class, they accepted every word as if it were a treasure. My grandmother would brew tea with a warm smile, and my grandfather would frame my clumsy drawings, proudly hanging them on the wall, saying, "It's wonderful." Their home felt like an entirely different world to me. In the small garden, flowers bloomed in every season, and the living room was always bathed in gentle sunlight. There, I was never compared to anyone. I was never forced into a role or made to feel invisible. It was the only place where I could truly breathe, where I felt seen and loved just for being myself. My grandparents' house was like another world to me. In the small garden, flowers bloomed with each passing season, and warm sunlight streamed into the living room. There I was never compared to anyone, nor was I forced into a role. It was a place where I could simply be myself, where quiet and gentle time flowed. On days when something unpleasant happened at school, I would hurry down the road toward my grandparents' house. As soon as I opened the front door, the sweet smell of my grandmother's freshly baked cookies would greet me. My grandfather would set aside his newspaper and, upon seeing me, spread his arms wide in an exaggerated gesture. "Welcome," he would say, and I can't even begin to describe how meaningful those words were to me. As I grew older, my visits to their house became less frequent, but in my heart, I always carried the warmth I found there. The environment where I was constantly compared to my sister never really changed, but the feeling my grandparents gave me that it's okay to just be who I am quietly continued to support me. When I expressed my desire to attend university, my parents immediately opposed it. "We need money for Madeleine's wedding," they said, and my request for university education was quickly rejected. It seemed that my parents were putting all their efforts into her wedding. As the preparations progressed, their focus completely shifted to the extravagant event. The venue was a top-tier hotel with luxurious food and desserts, and the dress was custom-made. The whole ceremony was like something out of a movie, and my university plans were overshadowed by it. I couldn't give up, so I decided to pursue my education using student loans. The money my parents had saved up was mostly spent on my sister's wedding, and they didn't offer me any support for my own studies, but I didn't feel it was unfair. I understood that my sister's wedding was an important memory for her. To attend the wedding reception, my grandparents were invited as well. They had always cared deeply for me, and I could sense that they had picked up on the subtle tension in the air that day. My grandmother approached the table where I was sitting and quietly spoke to me. "How is university going, Catherine?" she asked, her voice filled with concern and kindness. I was a little surprised, but answered her nonetheless. "I'm studying hard right now. I want to work for a well-known marketing company in the future." My grandmother smiled, but there was a trace of a more complex expression in her eyes. "That's wonderful. Seeing you work so hard makes me really happy." I felt my heart swell with gratitude for her kindness. In that moment, a small part of my frustration with my parents seemed to ease. My grandfather, who had been listening to our conversation, added, "If you ever find yourself in a tough spot, don't hesitate to ask. We'll always be here to support you. You just focus on being happy," he said warmly. "We'll help you to achieve whatever you want to accomplish." I still clearly remember how reassuring those words were. The contrast between the opulence of the wedding and my grandparents' warm words left me feeling conflicted, but deep down, I made a firm decision. Even though my sister had been favored in many ways, I would carve my own path. No matter how difficult it might be, or how little the understanding I might receive from those around me, I had resolved to trust in my own future and keep pushing forward. My grandparents' words became my greatest source of strength. No matter what path I chose, no matter how long it took, I was determined to keep moving forward to make my dreams come true. Everything changed in the summer, just before my 3rd year of college. "Catherine?" Grandma's voice sounded thin and fragile through the phone. "Franklin, your grandpa had a massive heart attack in his study. The doctors couldn't save him." Her words dissolved into barely controlled sobs. I have no memory of the frantic drive to the hospital, only the crushing weight of grief as I entered the room to find him already gone. Grandma sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. I gently placed my hand on my grandmother's shoulder and silently leaned against her. Her small frame trembled, and through her warmth, I could feel the depth of her sorrow. For a while, the two of us sat quietly, sharing the silence. To my grandmother, my grandfather had been a precious companion she had walked through life with. Losing him left a gaping hole in her heart. When I looked up at her, I saw the love shaped by all the years they had spent together and the sadness of no longer being able to reach him reflected in her eyes. I squeezed her hand tightly, silently vowing to support her in any way I could, no matter how small. However, a month after my grandfather's death, my grandmother too passed away, as if to follow him to heaven. It was so sudden that I couldn't accept the loss. They were irreplaceable to me, always there to support me. My grandmother's warm words and my grandfather's strong encouragement still echo in my ears, and the thought that I would never hear their voices again was unbearably painful. My heart felt empty, and I didn't know what to do. 1 week after laying Grandma Eleanor to rest beside Grandpa Franklin, we assembled in the office. Mr. Patterson, their longtime attorney, carefully positioned his reading glasses, opened an embossed leather portfolio, and began reciting the legal document in a practice. To our beloved granddaughter Catherine, Mr. Patterson announced clearly, "We bequeath our lake house property at 1542 Pine Haven Drive along with liquid assets totaling $150,000. I could hear Madeline's inhaling sharply, saw her perfectly glossed lips part in speechless outrage, while my mother's manicured fingers dug into my father's forearm with such force that her knuckles blanched white against her skin. Mr. Patterson adjusted his tie and continued. Additionally, Franklin Rose included a personal message to his daughter Vivian. He looked directly at my mother before reading, "Vivian, we are not leaving you and Madeline anything. This decision reflects our final wishes. When you claimed to be in a financial emergency in preparing for Madeline's wedding, we provided $200,000. We respected your needs at that time. Therefore, we trust that you will respect our decision." At that moment, my mother stood up, her face flushed with anger. "There's no way I can accept this." Unable to contain her fury, she slammed her hand on the table. "We're family. It's completely unfair to treat only Catherine specially. Father and mother must have made some kind of mistake. I object. This needs to be reconsidered." Mr. Patterson quietly removed his glasses and let out a sigh. "Ms. Vivian, this is a formal will. The wishes of the deceased must be legally respected." My mother tried to argue further, but I simply sat there in silence. A storm of emotions raged inside me. but I had nothing to say. My grandparents' wishes were more important to me than anything else. When Mr. Patterson finished and gathered his documents, my parents rushed out discontentedly, but they were lying in wait for me in the parking lot. "Sweet Catherine," Mom said in a syrupy voice I had never heard before. I stopped, unable to hide the wariness in my eyes as I looked at her. "This isn't the best place to talk. Could you spare a little time?" She coaxed, with Dad and Madeline standing quietly behind her. After a moment's hesitation, I silently nodded. We entered a nearby cafe, and Mom wasted no time getting to the point. "Catherine, the lakeside house you inherited, it's a place full of memories for all of us, isn't it?" She spoke with a gentle smile, but there was a calculating gleam in her eyes. "And so?" She lifted her cup, took a small sip of coffee, and continued. "If you're willing to sell the house, I can introduce you to a good real estate agent. You could get a great price for it right now, and you'd have cash in hand. It's not a bad deal, don't you think?" I stayed silent. I had no intention of selling, but I held my tongue, curious to see where this was going. Without missing a beat, Dad jumped in. "Catherine, just maintaining a house costs a fortune. Property taxes, repairs, it's a heavy burden, especially for someone young like you." Madeline quickly added, "You're not planning to live all the way out there, are you? It would be smarter to sell it and use the money for yourself in a more convenient place." Her voice was gentle, but underneath, I caught a hint of urgency. The three of them were trying to persuade me with carefully chosen words, but their true intentions were all too obvious. They were dissatisfied that the inheritance from my grandparents hadn't been passed to them, and now they were trying to convince me to sell the house and turn it into cash. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand, whispering softly, "Catherine, we're family, right? Let's help each other out." I quietly withdrew my hand. A cold resolve began to grow in my heart. The house my grandparents had entrusted to me. It was the place where I first felt unconditional love, a precious repository of memories. There were things there that could not be measured by monetary value. I took a slow breath, then opened my mouth calmly. "I'm sorry, I don't intend to sell it." Mom's expression froze in an instant. Dad and Madeline were staring at me, speechless. I stood up and pushed my chair back. I want to cherish what Grandpa and Grandma left behind, along with that house. With that, I left the cafe. There was a strange warmth spreading in my chest. For the first time, I had been able to say no to my family with my own will, and I felt proud of myself. After that, I successfully graduated from university and got a job at the marketing company I had hoped for. At first, I was a bit confused by the unfamiliar tasks, but with the support of those around me, I gradually gained confidence. In my new workplace, I experienced the joy of seeing my ideas take shape every day, and I spent busy but fulfilling days. With the new job, I also started living on my own. It was a small apartment, but the space I had chosen and arranged myself gave me an irreplaceable sense of peace. After work, playing my favorite music and making coffee became the greatest reward for me. Since that day, I had almost no contact with my parents or sister. At first, there were a few awkward exchanges, but over time, I distanced myself, and before I knew it, months had passed without any communication. Though there were moments of loneliness, more than anything, the feeling that I was now truly walking my own life was what supported me. Living freely, choosing freely, without being bound by anyone. That daily life calmed my heart. One day, I suddenly received a phone call from my mother. "Catherine, would you join us for dinner this Friday?" Something in her tone sounded different. My instincts screamed it was a trap, but my curiosity overrode everything else. Pulling into the driveway of my childhood prison felt like entering a time warp where everything had deteriorated rapidly. The once pristine colonial house now resembled a neglected foreclosure, peeling paint flaked from the sides. Gutters hung at awkward angles, and the lawn my father once obsessively maintained had surrendered its space to dandelions and bare patches. Inside, the house felt cramped but surprisingly tidy. Oliver and Adrian, Madeline's 4-year-old twins, tore through the living room like miniature hurricanes. "Catherine." My mother embraced me with unexpected enthusiasm. "We've prepared your favorite pot roast with those little red potatoes you love." I stiffened in her embrace, the absurdity hitting me like a slap. "That's not my favorite," I said before I could stop myself. "That's Madeline's favorite." I've always preferred grilled salmon. An uncomfortable silence descended, heavy as concrete, until my father cleared his throat dramatically. "What is your favorite food?" he asked, his expression showing genuine curiosity. We should know these things. To my astonishment, they actually seemed sincerely interested in the answer. During dinner, they peppered me with questions about my Wall Street position, my Manhattan apartment, even my weekend activities. They appeared to genuinely listen when I explained derivatives trading. Though I could tell by their glazed expressions that the financial terminology might as well have been Sanskrit. As dessert was being served, my father spoke up. "This year we're expecting a lot of relatives for Thanksgiving, so we'd like to have it in a bigger house. I've been trying to find a spacious place to rent, but I haven't had much luck," he said. I put down my fork and quietly listened to his words. At that moment, what came to mind was the villa I had inherited from my grandparents. Surrounded by nature, spacious and peaceful, it seemed like the perfect place for a large gathering. More than anything, I thought it might be a good opportunity to step into that house again, which held so many memories of my grandparents. Then, my mother spoke up, a little hesitantly. "Would you be willing to lend us the villa you inherited?" I hesitated for a moment. That villa was a very special place to me. Was it really okay to lend it out so easily? Sensing my hesitation, my sister Madeline chimed in with a bright voice. "I'd love to take the kids to the villa," Madeline said. "Wouldn't it be wonderful to let them play freely in nature?" Her face lit up with an expectant smile. For a moment, a wave of complex emotions washed over me. That villa was a place filled with special memories of my grandparents and me. I couldn't help but feel hesitant about letting Madeline and her children come and go so freely. But then I thought about what my grandparents would have done. Surely they would have watched over the children running around, smiling warmly. With that thought in my heart, I slowly nodded. "Sure, let's all have a wonderful time together." And so it was decided that we would hold the Thanksgiving party at my villa. On Thanksgiving Day, I headed to the vacation home I had inherited from my grandparents, feeling a little nervous. I had made sure to arrive a bit early, according to the time my parents had given me for the party. I was excited to see my relatives again after such a long time, but more than anything, I was happy that everyone would gather at my grandparents' cottage. The place was filled with warm memories of the times I had spent with my grandparents as a child, and now my entire family would be stepping into it together. Just thinking about it made me feel as if my grandparents were joining us for this Thanksgiving celebration. I was sure they would be watching over us somewhere, smiling at the sight of us laughing and enjoying ourselves. As I drove, that thought made me smile naturally. I could already picture the children running around the yard and everyone gathered around the dining table, and it filled my heart with warmth. Not long ago, I had hesitated to open up the cottage to my family, but now I felt differently. Sharing the memories of my grandparents with everyone like this seemed like the best way to honor them. That's how I truly felt. However, the moment I opened the front door, something felt off. The house was filled only with the lingering traces of a gathering. Used plates and cups were piled up, and stains covered the tablecloth. The party had clearly ended long ago. The relatives were already gone, and only silence remained in the spacious villa. Confused, I stepped further inside. From the back of the house, I heard my parents laughing. Peeking into the next room, I saw them lounging on the sofa, chatting comfortably. I overheard my mother say with a laugh, "It's such a relief that she owns a big house. Let's leave the cleaning to her." My father chuckled in agreement. I stood there in silence, feeling the coldness seeping into my feet. I had offered the house out of a desire to help my family, but now it felt like I was seen as nothing more than a convenient owner. A deep, unspoken loneliness slowly spread through my chest. A sense of loneliness surged within me, and at the same time, anger welled up. I finally made a decision. I thought about confronting my parents directly, but I already felt as if I had been ignored, and it seemed pointless. As a place to channel my anger, I decided to call the police. Of course, I knew that just having the police come wouldn't immediately resolve the situation. However, I strongly felt that I had to do something to protect my rights. When the police arrived, an argument began between my parents and me. "Why did you call the police?" Dad approached me, his anger clearly visible. "This is the house I inherited. You two were trespassing," I replied firmly. "Trespassing? We're family. There's nothing wrong with us using this house. Besides, you said we could use it too." Mom spoke in a strong tone. "I didn't let you use it to be treated like this. I'm sick of you acting like family only when it's convenient. This place is very important to me," I shouted, tears welling up in my eyes, and then a police officer stepped in between us. "Please calm down. Since this is a family matter, we cannot treat it as a criminal case," the police officer said. At those words, I bit my lip. I felt as if no one was truly acknowledging my anger or sadness. Even after the police left, my parents showed no signs of remorse. "You're making such a fuss over nothing," my mother said, sounding exasperated. I made up my mind. "Fine. Then I'll sue you. We'll settle this properly in court," I declared. My father and mother looked surprised, but I didn't back down. I couldn't bear to have something so important to me trampled on any longer. And so, the conflict between my parents and me escalated into a civil lawsuit. I decided to consult with Mr. Patterson, the lawyer who had been assisting my grandparents for many years. He was an experienced attorney who had managed my grandparents' assets, and to me, he was someone I could truly trust. Listening calmly and carefully, he quickly grasped the situation and said firmly, "Even though they are your parents, your ownership rights must be protected." Those words gave me a profound sense of relief. Preparing for the lawsuit was anything but easy. Gathering all the necessary documents, records of interactions with my parents, the deed to the villa, and the history of its usage was an overwhelming task. However, I did not back down. This was a battle to protect my own dignity and the place that meant so much to me. On the day of the trial, I testified in court with confidence. Without being swayed by emotions, I conveyed the facts calmly but firmly. My parents, though visibly shaken, continued to insist on their own righteousness until the very end. A few weeks later, the verdict was delivered. The court recognizes the plaintiff's claims and orders the defendants to cease use of the property and pay damages. At that moment, I quietly closed my eyes and took a deep breath. At last, my voice had been acknowledged under the law. After the verdict was announced, my parents and sister began sending frequent messages and phone calls apologizing. At first, they were short messages of apology, but gradually they turned into pleas asking, "Please, just meet with us once." I didn't respond to any of them. Even so, they didn't give up. One day, after finishing work and returning to my apartment, I found my mother standing in front of the door. She looked exhausted, holding a small paper bag in her hand. "Welcome home," she said awkwardly. I kept my hand on the doorknob and stared at her in silence. "Please just listen to me for a moment," she pleaded. I sighed and reluctantly decided to stay by the door and hear her out. We truly regret what we've done. Hurting you, the whole situation with the villa. Please forgive us. We're family, aren't we? I shook my head quietly. I can't forgive you. Ever since I was a child, I was always the one suffering in the family. I'm tired of only being treated as family when it's convenient for you. Tears welled up in my mother's eyes. However, I didn't change my expression. Your father's company went bankrupt. He's drowning in debt right now. Please, can you help us? She said in a soft voice. I took a deep breath, then said clearly, I can't. I don't consider you my family anymore. My mother stared at me for a moment in shock, then slowly lowered her head and quietly left. I closed the door and immediately contacted Mr. Patterson. So, she came directly, huh? He said calmly. In that case, we should apply for a restraining order. It's necessary to protect both your life and peace of mind. I nodded quietly. Please. Thus, I made the decision to once again seek the power of the law to protect my world. Even if they were my blood relatives, I had no choice but to keep my distance from those who harmed me. After the restraining order was issued, my parents received an official document from the court by mail. They were deeply shocked by the news and immediately told relatives and close friends about it, expressing their dissatisfaction and complaints about my actions. However, for me, there was no change in the fact that this decision was the best choice. I heard from relatives that after the rupture in my relationship with them, my parents' and sisters' lives gradually deteriorated. I heard from relatives that after his company went bankrupt, my father struggled to find re-employment and spent his days chasing after debt repayment. With his arrogant personality, his relationships with those around him worsened as his debts piled up, and he lost most of his friends. My mother, while worrying about my father's situation, became mentally exhausted, and the household became increasingly unstable day by day. My sister, desperately raising her twin children, had a strained relationship with her husband and was worn out from child rearing. Financially, things were extremely tough, and she worked tirelessly to cover the costs of the children's education and daily living expenses. My sister often relied on our parents, and now that she no longer has that support, she is in an even more difficult situation. I heard that my sister also tried to reach out to me, but as I kept my distance, her mental exhaustion grew larger, and the family bond continued to weaken. Both my parents and my sister were suffering from the consequences of their past actions. Despite regretting what they had done, none of them could find a way to improve the situation, and their lives continued to decline. The connection of family had become increasingly thin, and each of them was isolated, carrying an unmanageable sense of anxiety and regret, struggling through those days as best as they could. After the complete severance of my relationship with my parents and sister, I focused entirely on my work. With every successful project, I felt my growth and gradually regained my confidence. After work, I spent quiet time in a cafe in the city, which allowed me to calm my mind. Meeting new friends and spending time with them also became a new source of support for me. On weekends, I visited the villa my grandparents had left behind. Located in a quiet mountain area, this house was a place where my grandparents had showered me with love, and it was filled with warm memories of them. As I recalled their smiles and the kindness with which they had cherished me, I felt enveloped by my grandparents' love. In that moment, I felt the wounds of my past begin to heal. Occasionally, I would reflect on the past, but each time, I forgave myself in my heart and grew stronger. I am no longer bound by the connections to my past family. I had decided to look forward and live my own life. And one day, it suddenly dawned on me. What I truly wanted to cherish was not family or past memories, but my own happiness and the future I would build.